Salvete omnes. This is exercise C of chapter 49, focusing on dependent subjunctive clauses, cum clauses, cum temporal / circumstantial, cum causal, and cum concessive, or also known as adversative. So cum meaning when, since, although. Directions say we are to turn these English sentences into Latin, starting with prima, sententia prima. When all of the infantry had assembled, Caesar gave the signal for battle and led the troops forward. Very nice. So here we have when all of the infantry had assembled. We have a temporal clause. We're saying when. So we want to use a cum clause because that's what this chapter is about. So cum. Now all of the infantry, instead of saying all of the infantry, get rid of the of here. We're just saying all infantry. So all the foot soldiers. Infantry also means foot soldiers. So the Latin is omnes, omne, the adjective all. It needs to modify pedes, peditus, masculine, meaning a foot soldier, someone that's on their pes, pedis, masculine, foot or feet. So cum, and then we want omnes pedites, had assembled, that is convenio, convenire, conveni, conventus, to venio, come, cum, together. They had assembled. So we want a pluperfect subjunctive because our main verb is perfect tense. Caesar gave. So past tense, the main clause is cast in secondary sequence. That means that the dependent subjunctive temporal cum subjunctive verb must be pluperfect subjunctive. If it were imperfect subjunctive, this action would be contemporaneous. But it has already happened. The infantry has already assembled by the time that Caesar gave the signal. This action is prior and must be the pluperfect subjunctive. We want the third plural, pluperfect active subjunctive of convenio, conveniscent. Cum omnes pedites conveniscent. Caesar, Caesar, Caesaris masculine, he's the subject, so Caesar. He gave do dare dedi datus. Third person singular perfect active indicative, gave, so did it. He gave the signal, signum e neuter, signal. The nominative or accusative, singular neuter, we want the accusative because it's the direct object, is signum. The signal for battle. Here we want the objective genitive, the signal of battle, or we could otherwise say battle signal. But because battle and signal are both nouns, English can throw nouns together, like battle signal. Put them right up next to each other. Latin can't do that. We have to say signal of battle. We can turn one of those nouns into a genitive to modify the other noun. Signal of battle. Remember, you can't say metro card in Spanish or in Latin, Spanish being a Latinate language. You have to say card of metro. Can't say doghouse. Have to say house of dog. Can't say battle signal. You have to say signal of battle. So signum proili, proili, from proilium, proili, neuter. Signum proili. So Caesar signum proili dedit, et. He also led the troops forward. So the troops, copiae, aurum, feminine, plural. So the accusative direct object would be copias. And the verb to lead forward is produco, producere, produxi, productus, to produce, to lead, duco, pro, forward. So he produxit copias. Altogether, cum omnes pedites conveniscent, Caesar signum proili dedit, et copias produxit. Optime. Secunda, sententia secunda. Although we have found out many things about the stars, yet we do not know how far away they are. Or do we? So although, when, since, although, screams out cum clause. And then we're going to have a yet, so a tamen in our main clause. So let's start out with the subordinate cum clause. Cum, we have found out. To find something out is cognosco, cognoscere, cognovi, cognitus. We have found out. We already have. Although we have already found out prior to the main verb. We do not know present tense in the main verb, primary sequence. That means that we have already found out prior. We want the perfect subjunctive. First person plural perfect active subjunctive of cognosco is cognoverimus. Cognoverimus. Now we have found out many things. We have found out many things. Multa, multa. This is the direct object. What have we found out? Many things. Do not use res, rei, feminine here for things. We have an adjective, many. Go ahead and make that plural and neuter to give the sense of things. So multa, multa, many things. The accusative plural, the singular being multum, much. We found out much about the stars. We have found out many things. Multa, about. De plus the ablative. Stella, I, feminine. We want the ablative plural. De stellis. De stellis. Swall together, something like cum multa de stellis cognoverimus. Yet, we do not know how far away they are. This is the main clause. We need that tamen, which is usually post-positive. So let's put something else in there. How about we do not know? Don't use non skio. Use nescio. We do not know, present tense. Nescimus. 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 Nescimus tamen. How far away they are. How far? How is quam. Far away is an adverb. It's the adverb form of longus aum. That's longe. Quam longe. And because we are in primary sequence, we're asking a question here. How far away are they? Now, that, if it were a direct question, would be quam longe absunt. Quam longe absunt. How far away are they? But because this is an indirect question, we do not know how far away they are. This needs to be subjunctive, not absunt, but the present absent. Absent. Cum multa de stellis cognoverimus, nescimus tamen quam longe absint. Quam longe absint. Optime, tertia, sententia tertia. When I shall have seen, the senator, I shall report to him everything which you said to me. So, when I see him, when I shall have seen him. So here we have cum, when, since, although. Now, the parenthetical side tells us we are to use the future perfect here. First person singular, future perfect, active indicative. And we do want the indicative because there is no future perfect subjunctive. So this is a cum temporal. We're going to use the indicative, future perfect, of video, videre, vidi, visus. So how about videro? Videro. So cum videro. And I'm going to see, whom am I going to see? The senator. Senator, senatoris, masculine. We want the accusative, singular, masculine, direct object, senatorem. Senatorem. Cum senatorem videro. So when I see him, I shall report to him. I'm going to use renuntio, renuntiare, renuntiavi, renuntiatus. I want the first person singular, future active indicative, renuntiabo, and I'm going to report something to him. I'm going to report everything, all the things, to him. This is going to be the direct object, everything, because it's the direct object of the verb report, and to him is going to be the dative indirect object, because that's who's going to get the everything, the direct object. So renuntiabo ei, the dative singular of is, ea, id, all genders. Everything equals all things, the plural neuter of omnis omne. So I want omnia. So renuntiabo ei omnia, which you said to me. This is a relative clause. All the things which you said to me. So the antecedent of the relative pronoun which is everything, all things. If all things is plural and neuter, then the relative pronoun must also be plural neuter. If everything, all things was accusative, the accusative direct object of the verb report. Inside the clause, which you said to me, the verb is said, you said which. So you is the subject of the verb said, which is the accusative direct object of said, and you said it to the dative indirect object, me. So we want the accusative plural neuter relative pronoun, which is quae, to go with the antecedent, omnia. Omnia, quae, you said it to me. Mihi, and then dixisti. Dixisti, the second person singular, perfect active indicative of dico, dicere, dixi, dictus. So altogether, something like cum senatorem videro ei nuntiabo omnia quae mihi dixisti. Quarta, sententia quarta. Since the enemy saw that they could not take our city, they were devastating our fields with fire and sword. That idiom, ferro et igni, fire and sword. So quarta, since the enemy saw, we have a causal clause. Because the enemy saw that they could not take our city, this is the causal clause, a dependent subjunctive clause introduced by the conjunction cum. The enemy saw, so this is our subjunctive verb here. Enemy, nominative plural masculine of hostis, hostis masculine. So the enemy saw. Video, videre, vidi, visus. So cum hostes, and then what tense do we want? Well, they were devastating our fields. So this is a past tense, imperfect tense. So secondary sequence, since the enemy saw. So since the enemy were seeing that they could not take our city, they were devastating our fields. So these actions are contemporaneous. These actions are happening at the same time. They were devastating our fields because they were seeing that they could not take our city. So we want the imperfect subjunctive. Third person plural imperfect subjunctive of video is viderent. Viderent. Cum hostes viderent. Now they saw that they could not take our city. That. This is the thing that they saw. What did they see? This noun clause, this substantive noun clause. So indirect statement. They. Now the they who could not take our city is the same enemy that saw it. So we want the reflexive here, because the reflexive reflects back on the subject of the main verb, the introductory verb, the saw. So we want the accusative, plural, of sui, sibi, say. The answer is say. The accusative is say. And they could not take our city. When you see, be careful with can and could. That's going to be possum. They were not able to take our city. They were not able to take. Non, and then possum, posse, potui. They saw that. Remember that this is an indirect statement, even though we're inside the cum clause, a dependent subjunctive clause. All that means is that this indirect statement here, well, that's still going to take an infinitive. The accusative is still going to be the subject. Infinitive is still going to be the main verb. So we want a form of possum, an infinitive of possum, posse, to be the main verb. We want the present posse. Cum hostes viderent, se posse, or we should more correctly say, se non posse, since they were not able, to, possum screams out for a complementary infinitive, to take. You could say occupo, occupare, occupavi, occupatus, occupare, Or you could use capio, capere, capi, captus. So capere. Either one works. Our city. Our city is going to be the direct object of the verb of the infinitive take. So our is a possessive adjective, noster, nostra, nostrum, agreeing with city. City being orbs, orbis feminine. The direct object is going to be in the accusative case, so we want urbem. Now, our, the possessive adjective, must also be accusative singular feminine, nostram, nostram, nostram urbem. Now that's the dependent subjunctive clause. Who is devastating our fields with fire and sword in the main clause? Why, it's the enemy. So the enemy, being the subject of both the subjunctive saw and the indicative devastating, we need to put enemy first. So hostes needs to come first. That needs to be the first word. Then we start off the cum clause. Kick it off with cum. So hostes cum viderent. Hostes cum viderent, that they saw that they were not able to take our city. Nostram urbem occupare non posse. They were devastating our fields with fire and sword. So, devasto, devastare, devastavi, devastatus. Third person plural, imperfect active indicative. They were devastating, you can see laying waste, to the direct object, our fields. So here we have fields, ager, agri, masculine, and then the possessive adjective noster, nostra, nostrum, our agreeing with fields. So if fields is the direct object of devastating, accusative, we want agros, nostros agros, with fire and sword. I gave you this idiom in the footnotes. It's ferro et igne. Ferro et igne. So altogether we have hostes cum se urbem nostram capere non posse viderent, agros nostros ferro et igne vastabant. Or you could say devastabant. Optime, quinta, sententia quinta. Since he thinks that the enemy are unable to withstand our attacks, he will draw up a line of battle. So since, we have a causal clause. Since he thinks, cum, he thinks. We have several verbs for to think. We have puto, putare, putavi, putatus. We could use existimo, existimare, existimavi, existimatus. Since he thinks. Go ahead and use puto. It's a first conjugation. So is existimo. So he thinks. Now, that looks like a present tense. It's going to be a present tense. So we look at our main verb, he will draw up. So future tense, we are in primary sequence. That means that this verb here is contemporaneous with this main verb. So cum, we want the present tense. Putet, putet. If you use existimo, it would be existimet. You want to change the A of the stem to an E, because those are first conjugation verbs, and this is the present subjunctive. So cum putet, cum existimet. He thinks that, what does he think? That the enemy are unable to withstand our attacks. So this is an indirect statement, He thinks that, subject accusative of the indirect statement, the enemy, the hostes, accusative plural masculine of hostis, hostis masculine, the hostes, they are unable, they are not able. So non posse, because we're in an indirect statement. The main verb is going to be an infinitive. Non posse screams out for a complementary infinitive, to withstand. That's going to be the verb sustineo, sustinere, sustinui, sustentus. It's subteneo, meaning to hold, teneo, from underneath, sub, to withstand, to hold from underneath. So sustenere. Non posse sustenere our attacks. This is going to be the direct object of the withstand, so the accusative. Yes, Keep in mind that the subject accusative of the indirect statement, that's accusative, as well as the direct objects also in the accusative. Don't get confused. An attack is an impetus plus masculine, so attacks would be impetus, macron over the us, so accusative plural, and then our must be accusative plural masculine of noster, nostra, nostrum to agree with it. So nostros impetus. So altogether the clause is going to be something like cum hostes sustenere impetus nostros non posse putet, or existimet. Then the main clause is very simply, he will draw up a line of battle. To draw up, that's going to be instruo, instruere, instruxi, instructus. We want the third person singular, future active indicative, instruet, and a line of battle is an acies, a feminine. Fifth declension, we want the accusative direct object, aciem. Aciem instruet. Very short main clause. Altogether, cum hostes sustenere impetus nostros non posse putet, aciem instruet. Instruet being the third person singular future. Instruit, it, it, would be the present. Instruet with the et, that's the future. Sexta, sententia sexta. Although reports of a disaster had been brought to us, yet we did not cease to hope. Here we have a concessive or adversative clause, cum concessive. So cum, a report is a fami feminine. We want more than one of them, so cum fami. Of a disaster, we want the genitive of calamitas, calamitatis feminine. So calamitatis. So fami calamitatis. Had been brought to us. You could say, you could use refere, retuli, relatus. So the reports, fami, nominative plural feminine, have been brought to us. You could say relati, like the word relate, had been relati, and then we want the pluperfect subjunctive because it's a prior action to a main verb that is secondary sequence. So relati essent. Relati essent. You could, and then brought to us. So dative, indirect object, nobis. Cum fami calamitatis nobis relati essent, because it's pluperfect passive, had been brought to us. Yet we did not cease to hope. Yet, nevertheless, yet still is tamen, postpositive. So let's go ahead and put an important word in front of the tamen. How about known? Known tamen, not yet did we cease to hope. To cease is desisto, desistere, destiti, destitus. So we did not do this, perfect tense, first person plural, destitimus, destitimus. And then that takes the complementary infinitive to cease to hope. Cease to hope, sperare. Non tamen sperare destitimus. Cum fami calamitatis nobis relati essent, non tamen sperare destitimus. Septima, sententia septima. When the legions had been left in camp, the general led the rest of the soldiers to the territory of the enemy. So this is a temporal clause when the legions had been left in camp. So I'm going to go ahead and use the subjunctive. We are in secondary sequence with the main verb, the general led, perfect tense. So they had been left. This is going to be a pluperfect subjunctive. It's going to be third person plural, and it's going to be passive, had been left in camp. So cum legio, legionis feminine, legiones. Remember, legion is feminine. So cum legiones had been left in camp. Relinquo, relinquere, reliqui, relictus. Don't use discedo or excedo here. This is not a leave verb, as in someone's departing. This is a leave something behind verb. The legions were left behind. So you have to use relinquo. We need the fourth principal part, relictus aon, needs to agree with the nominative plural feminine legions, relicti, and then they had been left in camp, essent, pluperfect passive, essent. Cum legiones relicti essent in plus the ablative of castra, orum, always neuter, always plural, castris. So cum legiones in castris relicti essent. What then happened next? The general, the imperator, imperatoris masculine, the imperator, subject, he led the rest of the soldiers. When you see the rest of something, go ahead and cross out the rest of and write remaining. He led the remaining soldiers. The reliquus aon, adjective, modifying the noun miles militis masculine, soldiers. Needs to be plural because there's more than one. And these are the direct object of the verb led. So duco, ducere, duxi, ductus, he led, third person singular, perfect active indicative. Imperator duxit reliquos milites, or milites reliquos. Through is per plus the accusative showing motion towards. So per territory, finis masculine, meaning end or boundary. And the plural can mean boundaries or territory. So per fines, plural, per fines, of the enemy, hostium. We're going to go ahead and nestle that genitive of the enemy in between the preposition and the noun. So per hostium fines. Cum legiones in castris relicti essent, imperator reliquos milites per hostium fines duxit. Optime, octava, sententia octava. As soon as we arrived at the town, we came immediately to find our friends. So as soon as we did something is going to be cum primum plus the perfect indicative. We're going to use the perfect indicative. This is cum temporal. Cum primum, we arrived. That is pervenio, pervenire, perveni, perventus. So pervenimus, macron over the second E. Pervenimus. Cum primum ad oppidum pervenimus, or you could say in oppidum pervenimus. Remember, pervenio takes ad or in plus the accusative motion towards to tell you where you arrived at. So cum primum in or ad oppidum pervenimus. We came immediately to find our friends. Immediately is statim, like stat, scalpel, stat, immediately. Statim. We came is the first person plural, perfect active indicative of venia, venire, veni, macron over the E, ventus. So statim venimus. Now, don't you dare write the infinitive in venire. This is not an infinitive thing. This is a purpose expression. You need to do something with purpose. Because to come is a verb of motion, you could just use the accusative supine. Inventum nostros amicos, or you could use an accusative gerundive, ad nostros amicos inveniendos, or you can use an adverbial purpose clause. We came immediately to find our friends. Ut amicos nostros, and then we want the imperfect subjunctive because we're in secondary sequence. Inveniret, or inveniremus, so that we may find our friends. Inveniremus. So altogether, cum primum ad oppidum pervenimus, statim venimus, ut amicos nostros inveniremus. Or you could also say, inventum nostros amicos, or ad nostros amicos inveniendos. Nona, sententia nona. At that time when I saw Caesar himself, I was living in the city. I was living in the city at the time when I saw Caesar himself. So this is a purely temporal cum. Purely temporal cum, when I saw Caesar himself. So, cum, I saw. Vidi, we want the first person singular, perfect active indicative. Caesar himself said, Veni, vidi, vici, I came, I saw, I conquered. So, cum vidi, we want the accusative of Caesar here. Caesar, Caesar is masculine. Caesarem. And then himself. This is the intensive or emphatic pronoun. It modifies Caesar. So ipse, ipsa, ipsum. We want the accusative singular masculine, ipsum. Caesarem ipsum. Cum vidi Caesarem ipsum. Cum Caesarem ipsum vidi. Tum. I was living. Habito, habitare, habitavi, habitatus. We want the first person singular. Habitabam, imperfect tense. In urbe, in plus the ablative of orbs, orbis, feminine is urbe. Tum in urbe habitabam, or in urbe tum habitabam. Cum Caesarem ipsum vidi, in urbe tum habitabam. And the tum, the at that time, is there to really point out that this is a temporal cum, and therefore takes the indicative. And decima, sententia decima. Although they have received many serious wounds, nevertheless they are fighting very bravely. Although, we have a cum concessive or adversative clause. So cum, they have received many serious wounds, nevertheless, so we'll have a tamen in the main clause. They have received. So they are fighting right now, present tense, primary sequence. They have already received the many serious wounds. So this subjunctive verb is going to be in the perfect subjunctive. Perfect subjunctive. So accipio, accipere, accepi, acceptus is to receive. They have received. So acceperent, acceperent. They have received many and serious wounds. They have received multa, from multus to agree with wounds, and serious, gravis grave, to agree with wounds. So wounds is going to be vulnus, vulneris, neuter. And these are wounds that we have received. So they, the subject, have done the verb to the direct object, wounds, vulnera. Now, these adjectives, many and serious, must agree with the vulnera. So this is accusative plural neuter, so must multus and gravis grave. So multa, vulnera, gravia. If you do it that word order, it's fine. So the quantitative multa, then the noun vulnera, and then the qualitative gravia, because qualitative adjectives usually go after the noun and quantitative usually precede the noun. If you wanted to say vulnera, multa et gravia, or vulnera, multa graviaque, that would also work. So, cum multa gravia, multa vulnera gravia acceperent. Nevertheless, they are fighting very bravely. Let's put the very bravely as the emphatic word. Superlative adverb, fortis forte. Fortissimus make it the adverb form fortissime. Fortissime tamen. And then the third person plural, present active indicative of pugno, pugnare, pugnavi, pugnatus is pugnant. Cum, let's see, cum multa vulnera gravia acceperent, fortissime tamen pugnant. Optime, very well done. That wraps it up for exercise C, and that wraps it up for chapter 49 as well. Valete omnes.